And we should be live. Hello, YouTube. Twilight Apprentice here, doing a live stream today. Today we're going to talk about collectibles, signed collectibles specifically. Yesterday, I saw a video from Dave over at Comic Book Investments. I'm going to pull his channel up here. Definitely go check him out. Here's Dave over at Comic Book Investments. Great channel. Love this guy. He talks about comic books predominantly, as the name of his channel indicates, but he does like a Finance Friday thing, which is super cool. Love when normal everyday people talk about their experiences in the financial world. He's got some experience in real estate. He's got some firsthand experience running a small business. So I'd love to hear his thoughts on that kind of stuff. And obviously, I found him through his work on comics. So this video here, signed versus not signed. He did this video, 15 hours ago. So he did this video yesterday, and I checked it out. And you should, if you're at all interested in high quality graded comics, or any collectible really, but comics specifically for his channel, check it out. You'll probably learn a little bit about comics and about signed comics in particular. But it got me thinking about, let me go back to me. Go check out Dave. Got me thinking about the signed collectibles I have in my collection, comics, and then I started to think about his thoughts on how do signatures increase the value of a graded comic in the comic book world. And Cliff Notes version is it kind of depends on the comic, kind of depends on the signature, but generally I think in comics, if you have a certified authenticated signature on your comic, your graded comic, it's probably going to increase the value. But is that the case for other collectibles? And it kind of depends. So today I wanted to talk about a couple different collectible categories, and there's definitely more, right? But I'm going to talk about comics again that Dave brought up, and I've got some examples of signed comics, graded comics that I have. Talk about trading cards. For me, that means predominantly Magic. We have some Pokemon and stuff around the house. Maybe some Yu-Gi-Oh stuff that the kids have, but nothing that I would consider a valued collectible. I'm sure some of the older Pokemon cards have tons of value. I just don't have it in me to dig through and see which ones do. So for me, that's going to mostly mean Magic. And then also talk about things like action figures. You could probably expand this out to look at collectible video games and who knows what else. Artwork, first edition books, all kinds of different things. But I'm going to talk about the collectibles and specifically use examples that I have, because that's kind of where I have a little bit of personal stake, and it's where my head went to after watching Dave's video. So let's start with Magic cards. So like I mentioned with Dave's video, it kind of depends on the signature, it kind of depends on the comic, but generally I think with comic books, having a signed copy, a good high grade graded signed authenticated signature signed copy, is worth it, right? It increases the value of your comic. Dave's video goes into this, but if you have a graded, hold this up here. If you have a graded CGC comic, see if I can do this without the glare. It has this yellow label, right? What this yellow label means is somebody from CGC, the grading authority, has witnessed the signee signing their name. And so in addition to grading the comic for its quality, like what kind of shape it's in, they've also authenticated that, yes, in fact, the handwriting on this copy of the comic is the signature of the person in question, either the author or the artist or Stan Lee, right? So that's what that yellow label means. And other grading companies, do that differently. For something like Magic the Gathering cards, um, those signatures aren't authenticated. I've broken all of my cards out of their grading cases, um, because I mean, this may hurt the soul of some Magic speculators and collectors, but um, with my cards, even my vintage cards, Power Nine, um, dual lands and stuff, I break them out of the cases if they are graded, because I stick them in decks, I shuffle them up, and I play them. I'm careful with them. I take great care of them. I store them securely and safely, but I'm not afraid to stick them in a deck and shuffle them up and play some vintage with friends. But I'll just pull some examples of cards that I have graded. So this is an Underground Sea, right? So this is an old card. It's one of the original Magic the Gathering cards. This one's, oh man, terrible on the camera. This one's white bordered, right? So there are more expensive rather versions of this card. But this card, I'll look at prices. We'll do some comparisons. This is a good card in great shape. Sorry, I should say this is a desired card in great shape. And, 20 plus years old, it holds a fair amount of value. Magic's kind of hot right now, has been for several years. These, I should say, these are great. These are signed versions of that same card. Okay. These are signed by the artist who did the original work for these. These are Underground Seas. Okay. So let's look at which is more valuable. The cards themselves are old and fairly valuable. But how much value do they hold? Just intrinsically, and does the signature add or remove anything from that? So I pulled up, this is TCG Player. The reason I'm looking here is TCG Player is a good aggregation of a lot of buy it nows, essentially. It's hard. We'll use eBay to find signed cards just because there's fewer signed cards available than there are unsigned cards. But TCG gives us the right now, sorted by pricing and shipping. I could find a lightly played copy of an Underground Sea for right around $725, $750. I mean, there's plenty of these to choose from. That's a pretty good indication of the value of that card. But what does a signature do to that? Well, let's hop over to eBay for that and look at this. So, oops, I was scrolling down. Signed copy of that card. Here's some buy it nows for like $800, $850. I wanted to point this out. Here's a signed misprint. Now you'll see this is way more expensive. And the reason for that is if you look at this card, it's a mistake, right? So there's probably 2 or 3 people in the world that want this card. And for them, they would pay this price. It's important that it is, in fact, an Underground Sea. It may or may not be important to them that it's signed by Rob Alexander, the artist. But what they want is they want the miscut. When this big sheet of Magic cards was run through the plant, it was misaligned, and when the cards were cut out, part of the card to the left on the sheet got included in this Underground Sea. And there's a group of collectors out there that specifically target mistakes, roller crimps, missed colors, offset, things like this. They're after those mistakes, and they'll build entire cubes and stuff around misprint cards. Most people The vast majority of people don't want misprints, but some of them do want signatures. And this would seem to indicate that, the signature is more valuable, right? A signed version of an underground sea, right, is more valuable than an unsigned one. But I want to say that's not necessarily the case, and that's because of desirability, because of volume. Um, with with trading cards, signatures are viewed by a lot of people as damaged cards. Couple reasons. One, there's ink on the card, right? There's no way you're ever getting that off. This pristine piece of cardboard that has intrinsic value or has assigned value, perceived value, has been disfigured with ink, right? So it's irrevocably changed, irreparably damaged. Two, signatures for Magic the Gathering cards often can't be verified. And if the card is loose, there's no way to confirm that it was in fact Rob Alexander who signed either or both of these cards, right? So maybe the card is just defaced. And then aesthetically, since these are playing cards and some people actually play them, there's a display issue, right? Do you want ink over the top of the card that you intend to play with? Is it going to look? Is the rest of your deck does it also include signed cards or the rest of your collection, right? So all these variables come into play where that, as opposed to a comic encased in CGC plastic, that's only intended for display. For a trading card, is there enough of the population that just wants that signed display piece, or do the majority of people rather have a clean card, one that isn't blemished with ink or looks inconsistent to the rest of their playing cards, or has a name on it that can't be authenticated as the signature of the artist, right? So you just start layering these questions on, and for a lot of people, that's going to devalue that signature. But for the people who are specifically after signed cards, it might make it desirable. So what you would see with prices here is underground seas generally go for about 700, 725, 750 bucks right now. And someone or someones are selling a few copies and trying to get a premium for the signature. Will they get it? Who knows? Let's look at sold items. This tells a bit of a different story. So when you look at sold items, right, you see that with 46 bids, right? 46 bids. So that's a fair amount of traffic. This one went for under 600. And it was relatively recently. It was the end of September. This one sold September 27th. Again, 22 bids, 650. This is a terrible picture of this one. And not very many bids. This one was a buy it now or best offer, and the price is crossed out here, so who knows what the offer was. This is a black bordered card, so it's just inherently a different price. Unsigned cards. So there's some question on quality. There's some question on shipping, where it's coming from, the reviews of the seller, right? So there's some other things at play, but it's a decent indication that even though people are asking a premium for signatures, they don't always get it, and I think that's volume. If you're interested in signed cards, you can usually find them. They don't move very fast. You can generally find a deal. So as opposed to comic books, where you can kind of expect to get a premium for a signature on your signed comic book, specifically if it's somebody really famous, or an actor who played the character, or somebody who's passed away, like Stan Lee. With trading cards, not quite so much. We'll look at another one. Let me get back to me. Boomer moments here. My Ancestral Recall is signed. Whoa. So get a camera. It's Mark Poole's signature there. I don't know how to get that to focus better. Actually, I'm not going to pull those up, just kind of belaboring the point. For me, I have those signed copies because I wanted the cards. I didn't particularly care if they were inked or not because I knew I was going to play with them. I'm definitely taking good care of my cards. Some like this Ancestral Recall, some of these are worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Like my Black Lotus is unsigned. In fact, all my other power is unsigned, and I prefer it that way. I would rather, my Ancestral was unsigned as well. I'm just not interested in paying a couple grand for an unsigned version of Ancestral. And I don't really want to go through the trouble. I don't need to. I don't want to go through the trouble of listing mine and selling it. So anyway, as opposed to comics, where I think a signature kind of inherently does lend some value, that's not necessarily the case with trading cards, even high dollar, high value trading cards. Just because I don't feel like there's as many people. There's already a smaller subset of people who care about signatures with collectibles. Both with cards, since there's also a larger group of people who kind of view inking as damage, and since the signatures aren't as they aren't generally authenticated, far less value there. Let's look at comics though. So I just brought out a couple comics. This one I already showed. So here is a signed Star Wars #1, and there's lots of Star Wars #1s. Obviously, there's the first Star Wars comic ever made from 1977. We'll look at that one in a second. This one's from 2020 or something. But this is a sketch cover, right? So this was the first issue of a Marvel comic run. And they make these covers that are blank. And the reason they do that is so they can give them to artists, or so comic fans can buy them and have people sign them, have artists draw on them. So this is one. Ahsoka is my favorite Star Wars character, by far, not even close. My favorite Force user. She's just love this character. Best character arc in Star Wars. This is a sketch cover from Stephen Kurth, and he's the artist, and inked by Steve Liddick, who I don't know, but look at it, it's gorgeous. He did a fantastic job. But I really like Kurth's art, and Ahsoka is my favorite character. There's only one of these, right? This is a sketch that he drew, and another artist inked it, and because it is both signed and authenticated by CGC, anyone who wants this comic, and again, there's only one of them, anyone who wants this comic has the full faith and guarantee of the of CGC, the grading company, that this comic was in fact sketched by Stephen Kurth, inked by Liddick, and both of their signatures were witnessed, and this label proves that. And of course, it's a 9.8, so it's a super high grade, good copy, good quality comic. So does a signature increase the value of this? Well, it's unique as a sketch cover. He may have done more sketch covers that day or at that conference, or may have done more since, but there's only one of these, right? This has not been mass produced. So for me, this comic has a lot of value. If you're not interested in the character Ahsoka, if you don't like Steve Kurth's artwork, well, maybe it has no value to you. But for me, it has a lot of value because it's a beautiful object, and I feel confident in it, in owning it, and in the retention of its value because of the grade. Plus, it's also protected. It's easier to display. I don't have to worry as much about it fading or getting dirty or something spilled on it because it's encased in CGC plastic. So that's, as opposed to a Spawn #1 signed by Rob Liefeld. in equal grades, like a 9.8 Spawn #1 and a 9.8 Spawn 1 signed by Rob Liefeld. It's going to have more value, right? This is, I think, a place where the signature still has value, but for very different reasons. This is again a sketch cover, and I pulled this one out because again, even though this is this is Daredevil 1 from, I don't even know when the date is, 2014. So is this the first issue of Daredevil? No, not at all. Daredevil's been around for forever, and while he's my favorite superhero, this is nowhere near his first appearance. This comic by itself doesn't really have much value, even as a 9.8. It just doesn't have much value. However, this is a sketch cover, and it's signed by the cast of the Netflix Daredevil show, right? So Charlie Cox has signed this. Deborah Ann Wool has signed this. And I'm really happy to have her signature. I never saw True Blood, or I don't know if I've ever seen her in anything else, but I loved her in Daredevil. I've done a few portraits of her and stuff in painting too. So yeah, the Eldon, forget his last name, who plays Foggy Nelson. He's in here. Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. And right here, Stan Lee. So asking the question, do signatures increase the value of collectibles? Well, much like Dave was saying in his video, it kind of depends on the signature and it kind of depends on the comic. This Daredevil 1 sketch cover comic is almost unimportant. It's a cool sketch, right? It's beautiful. It looks great. Uninked. It's just like a pencil sketch. But that doesn't matter at all, really, for the value of it. It's the fact that it's signed by that cast. And I think Marvel's Netflix Daredevil series is the best live action superhero stuff to come out of Marvel. I love the MCU. Jury's kind of out on the Phase 4 stuff. It's been more miss than hit so far for me. The Disney Plus stuff has a little way to go, I think, before it's, before they're putting out good shows. They're putting out good episodes, but they haven't strung together a good show in my perspective. But the MCU as a whole, love it. We've had a glorious decade of fantastic science fiction and fantasy, in great part because of the success of superhero movies, of comic book movies. And the MCU sets the bar on that, or at least it has so far. But in my opinion, that Netflix Daredevil stuff is the best thing Marvel has in live action so far. And to have, and I don't think we'll ever get that again. Disney has those characters now. There's tons of rumors swirling that they're going to bring that cast back, but even if they do, it's going to be different showrunners. It's going to be different writers. It's a different time. It's going to be Disney, so I don't know if they'll be as hard hitting as kind of gritty and grounded as that series was. I think it's reasonable to expect it won't be. Right. So to have those signatures from those actors, and also to have Stan Lee on that, and there's a lot of Stan Lee signed stuff out there. That man, he signed a lot of things in his life, but unfortunately for us, we've lost him. So that life is over, and there won't be more signatures of his. So to have a certified, authenticated copy of a Daredevil-related comic with a Daredevil-related unique sketch signed by in my opinion, the 4 main cast members, right, from that show, and Stan Lee, is enormously valuable. And I'm super, super proud to own it. Now let's look at this guy. So this is the original Star Wars #1, right? From 1977. And this is blue label, it's not signed, right? So this comic, and it is rarer, right? Because it's old. It's in great condition. So this has value, and we'll look at that a little bit. So that's the original Star Wars comic from the 70s. I don't know what that comic runs unsigned, but we're going to look at signed stuff. If we looked at let's actually look. Let's get a new eBay window up here. I'm going to pull this up. What is that running for now? I have no idea. I probably don't want to look because CGC Star Wars 1877 Star Wars #1. It's probably going to make me want to sell mine. All right, let's take a look at this. So this is like a 6.5. This is pretty beat up, $700. 9.0, that's getting there. $900. Here's 9.8, $7,000. Let's look at sold listings actually. Sold items. What are they actually selling for? This is a reprint. We can ignore that. This is a buy it now. These are all reprints. I should have had this prep before because these are still the reprints. I don't even know if I can say no reprint. Smart as your search, eBay. Okay, so here's a 9.4 white to off-white pages. It's not in great shape. No bidding is ended, obviously. I can't look at it. Anyway, it's kind of pointless. I was going to pull up the value of this. Yeah, these are not the original. But let's look at the signed copies. Sorry, slight detour there. Good content. We look at a signed copy of this comic. It is $16,800 is what they're asking for this buy it now. That is a staggeringly high price tag, right? If you look at Dave's video, the one that got me thinking about all this stuff from yesterday, the signatures on the comics that he was looking at increased the value, but we're talking like 30%, 40%. In some rare cases, maybe doubled or tripled the price. But you can probably get a high quality version of a Star Wars #1 from 1977 for a couple $1,000s. I don't know, maybe they're under $1,000, couple $1,000. But this one is, talk about a premium. So this is signed by Stan Lee. And again, Stan Lee is passed, so his signature is probably more valuable now than it was, say, even 3 or 4 years ago. But that's a staggering price, right? Almost $17,000 for this. If we look at this one, same comic, same grade, but this one is signed by Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. It's also signed by David Prowse, but signed by Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher's obviously passed. Mark Hamill still with us, still kicking, not a young man. But you're certainly not going to you're not going to be able to replicate this. If you were lucky enough to have a 9.8 graded comic that you're willing to break open and get signatures on, and then run the risk of regrading it, and fingers crossed you can get that 9.8 again, which is not guaranteed. That's stringing together a lot of ifs. If you've got a loose copy of this comic, from the 70s, and have any expectation that you can get a high grade on it, the likelihood of being able to find a loose copy of this that you can get a 9.8 on and that you're willing to have signed and get graded, pretty low, right? And then obviously Carrie Fisher is no longer with us, so of course this can't be replicated. So this is you're getting into rarefied territory here. There's probably more Star Wars #1 1977 high grade comics out there than most speculators and investors would like to admit. It's uncommon, but it's certainly not unique, and it's a stretch to say that it's rare. These float around, right? But signed by Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher, the ask price on this is almost $120,000. So as opposed to collectible cards, where there's a significant portion of the player base that loves that game, that collects that game, that views signatures as damage rather than adding value. Depending on the signature, depending on the comic, depending on like whether it was the artist or a famous actor, whether or not they're living or have passed, really can impact the price on comics. I was going to pull up this too. This is who cares about this book, right? It's Star Wars #1 from Marvel from 2015. This is not rare. It's not particularly valuable. Sure, it's a variant cover, but these variant covers are printed, still printed en masse to kind of drive hype for new releases. I don't know how many Star Wars #1s there have been over the year, but every time they start a new run of the story, it'll be #1, and that's comics have #1s, reboot series, start new series, and they put #1 on it because first issues tend to sell. So they do it a lot. So this is the M&M Comics edition. Jason Aaron story, John Cassidy artwork, Dave Dorman cover, like whatever. You can find this. You can find this in a 9.8 if you want it. But this one's signed by George Lucas, and they're trying to sell it for $9,000. Most people aren't going to buy this. But if you happen to be a huge Lucas fan and you want his signature, who knows, maybe they'll be able to get this, right? So the only reason I pulled this one up, it caught my attention because literally nobody cares about this comic, right? Maybe it sells for a couple $100 in high condition because it is a variant cover, whatever, but it's not, it's not a hugely sought after, desirable collectible that somebody's going to like take dollars they might otherwise be investing in the stock market and dump into this. But it's got Lucas's signature on it. And at least in some collectors' minds, that radically changes the price. The last thing I was going to pull up was some action figures. I don't collect a lot of Funko Pops. I got some back here, just of my favorite characters, Daredevil, Ahsoka. It's because I wanted to have a smaller shelf in my display with my 12 scale figures, the 6-inch figures. And that display case still isn't finished. I'm working on the big tall spot here is going to be comic displays and a cool like starport looking video thing. Working on it. Last thing I was going to pull up is these. So, action figures. What do signatures do for things like action figures? I honestly didn't know because I would never look to get an action figure signed. I open my action figures. I like to play with them. I like to display them. They are not investments at all for me. They're barely even collectibles. I do collect them, but they're disposable, right? I've got some ElfQuest figures from, I think, the late 90s or early 2000s. But like the chemicals volatilize out of the plastics. Like even if you keep them in pristine condition, they can get sticky and tacky and smell funny. I don't view action figures as investments, as collectibles in that sense. They're more disposable for me. I treasure them. I try to keep them in good shape, and I love displaying them, and they give me joy to see. But if I were to look at a physical representation of a favorite character, for example, as an investment, as a true collectible, I would look at a limited edition statue, and I do that. And I have my statues behind me. I might put a statue behind me, actually, a statue or two back there, but they're big. Right. But I would look at those more as investments. So I just pulled up one. Deadpool's popular, so I pulled up him, and you would certainly want to do more research than I've done if you want to know for certain if signatures increase the value of a collectible figure. But the first figure that popped in head was Deadpool, so I pulled him up. This is the construction worker Deadpool. $17, $12, $20 shipped, I guess. $9, $10. So this guy's $10 to $20 shipped, right? If it's signed, so Daredevil, I think, is most known in association with Ryan Reynolds at this point, rather than whoever it was that created him. I think that was Rob Liefeld. I don't know. I don't care enough about the character to have that correct. But signed by Ryan Reynolds. Somebody's asking $360 for it. So I guess if all the stars align where you want you love a character, you view action figures or Funkos or whatever as a valuable collectible, right? As kind of an investment level collectible, which I don't, but you might. You have a particular real life person who you value or treasure their association with that fictional character, and you have their signature. I guess if all those stars align, you might pay a premium, and in this case, I don't know how many times, 18 times more valuable than the unsigned figure. And then it's, these are unauthenticated, right? There's no CGC looking at this figure saying, yeah, that's actually Ryan Reynolds' signature. Maybe for you, if you were at a convention or something, you were the one who got it. You would know in your heart that yes, this was in fact Ryan Reynolds that signed it. But if you ever tried to sell this, for $360, $300, whatever, the person buying it would have nothing other than their faith in you, and maybe side by side. If this is a forged copy, it's pretty close, right? They would have no assurance other than that was in fact a signature if they valued that. So for me, for action figures, yeah, I mean, if you want to go to conventions and get them signed and try to flip them and find that one or two people out there who for whom that holds value, good luck with your hustle. But I don't think signatures on action figures legitimately should give a lot of value to those, to even unopened packaged figures. Your mileage may vary. So I guess to sum up, I think check out Dave's video, because dude knows a ton about comics. He runs a comic shop. That is his business. Get his thoughts on signed comics. For me, the signed comics I have, I value them because they're authenticated, they're sealed. I do think they hold value because of that third-party authentication, but I never intend to sell them. I think Dave's in like LA or San Diego or something, right? He's in a densely populated area where he can reliably find deals online and go talk to collectors and buy out their collections and flip those and sell them. And I live in an area where anything I get is probably has to be done through online. There's just not much chance of finding stuff local, and it's pain in the ass to sell stuff because it's got to be an online transaction. It's got to be packaged. It's got to be shipped. A lot of times it's got to be ground freight. It's just I don't live in an advantageous place to cash in on just the logistics, the shipping pieces of buying and selling collectibles. And also, I'm just not really inclined to do that. Like my Magic cards, I break them out of their cases, so I have the actual card rather than the, entombed in hard plastic and protective acrylic, right? So I'm not, and the thought of going through, at this point, only thousands, but there was a time where it was tens of thousands of Magic cards and selling them individually. just sounds nightmarish. There's better ways to spend my time, and in my mind, better ways to make money. If you're the type of person who deals with collectibles as as your business or as a side hustle, and you can get a little mileage out of signatures, great. If you have your thumb on the pulse of that market, and you know how to find those buyers, I think that's cool, and maybe you can make money there. But for me, I intend to keep these pieces, and the fact that my Daredevil uh, sketch cover is signed by Stan Lee in that cast, and that that can't ever be replicated. I just find that cool. It gives me a smile every time I see it. I like to see it with my 1/6 scale Daredevil figures, and sometimes I set that display up, and it's close to my desk, and I can look over and see that and smile. And if I ever want to watch something that I think is just amazing, I don't have to worry about modern day studios putting out a product I like. I can always go back and rewatch that Netflix Daredevil season, buy your digital media on disc if you want to make sure you always have it. I can watch that on DVD, and I'm happy. So anyway, that's the thoughts that got spurred by Dave's video yesterday. Dave, thank you for making your videos. I enjoy them a lot, and that's a little bit of thoughts on how do Dave's thoughts on signed comics translate to other collectibles, and it really depends. Depends on the collectible, depends on the collector. All right, that's all I got for today. Just stuff I was thinking about, and maybe I'll be back with another unboxing video sometime soon. Bye. In stream.